If you are a filmmaker or a videographer and you're not using ND filters, then you definitely need to get you some ND filters and start using them ASAP. What is going on, guys? It's your boy Randy with On This TV, and if you're new here, I make tips and tricks videos for filmmakers and videographers, and I do tech reviews. So if you're interested in any of those things, definitely consider subscribing to the channel. So I just picked up these variable ND filters. These are the Freewell variable NDs. This is the 2 to 5 and the 6 to 9 stop. I bought them in a pair. These are not the Mist Edition variable ND filters, but these are just regular VND. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you guys why you need ND filters and how it's important and how it can elevate your cinematography. So basically what ND filters are, they're essentially sunglasses for your camera, for your lens. And if you want to get a shallow depth of field and bright sunlight conditions, then you will want to get ND filters. Because a lot of times you bump your ISO as low as it can go, and then you have your aperture set to where you want it, but then you still have to crank that shutter speed to get a shallow depth of field. And when you crank that shutter speed, you get a lot of like jitter. You don't get that natural motion blur. So when you're shooting, you would want your shutter speed to be double your frame rate. So if I'm shooting 24 frames per second, my shutter speed needs to be 1/50th of a second. And if I'm shooting 60 frames per second, my shutter speed needs to be 120 and so forth. That's how you maintain that natural motion blur, and that's how you get that cinematic look. In this shot right here, I had my shutter speed double my frame rate, I had the ISO at 100, and my f-stop, I had to crank the f-stop all the way to about f16 just to get a decent exposure. And when you're shooting at f16, you kind of lose that shallow depth of field. You get that deep focus. Now, I'm not saying shallow depth of field is better than deep focus, because if your story requires you to have deep focus, then by all means go with that. Story is more important at the end of the day. But if you want that shallow depth of field outside in bright conditions, then what I've been seeing was a lot of people cranking their shutter speed. Now in this shot, I'm cranking my shutter speed to compensate for getting that shallow depth of field, shooting at an f2. And as you can see, it's very jittery and it doesn't look flattering at all, and it looks unnatural. So I went ahead and set my camera to its ideal settings. With the Blackmagic 6K, the native ISO is about 400. So I leave my camera on ISO 400 because with the Blackmagic, you get the cleanest image at its native ISO, and that's most cameras, if not all cameras. You get the cleanest image when you shoot at its native ISO. So find out what your native ISO is on your camera and keep it on that ISO if you can. In most cases, like when I shoot inside, most of my shoots are controlled lighting, so I can keep my ISO at 400 and add lights where I need it. And if I need to go to 32, the cool thing about Blackmagic is dual native ISO. I can bump it to 3200 to get what I need. So all of my work is corporate interviews and everything is controlled, so I keep my camera at ISO 400. And I love shooting all my interviews and stuff at f2. It's not too shallow and it's not too deep. Sometimes I go to f4, but I just love f2 because you get a much more shallow depth of field. Especially for interviews, it just looks flattering to me. These are my optimal settings. This is how I like to set my settings on my camera, and this is what it looks like without ND. It's completely blown out. So when I put the ND, I had to go to about 8 stops of ND, and this is good exposure, and this is what the image looked like. So now I get a lot, I get that flattering look, and I still maintain that natural motion blur. Now let's move in indoors, and when you want to shoot inside. Now this is a shot of me sitting in front of a window, and this is, I had to bring in a light to compensate. And if I wanted to expose for that window, I would have to crank up my aperture or crank up my shutter speed, which is, I didn't want to do that. Once I added some ND, so what I did was I put my 2 to 5 stop ND on there, and I shot at 5, and I had 5 stops of ND, and all I did was just compensate with lights. If you don't have lights, then obviously you can't do this, but I definitely recommend that you get some good lights, some powerful lights of that. So I compensated with light. So I exposed for the window using my ND filter, and then I compensated with light to expose on my face. And I think this image looks a lot better than this one. And sometimes I do blow my windows out. It depends on the scene or the setting or the story. I would blow my windows out, and sometimes I would want my windows to be exposed. A lot of my corporate interview stuff I would expose for my windows, but a lot of narrative filmmaking I would blow my windows out just for that, cinematic look. But yeah, that's it. If this video was helpful, smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn on notification bells, and yeah, I will see you in the next video. Peace.